The Young Women's Christian Association of the Philippines is a private, non-stock, non-profit, non-sectarian, service-oriented, and charitable organization which was founded in 1948.
YWCA aims to develop the physical, social, intellectual, moral, and spiritual well-being of women and girls in accordance with the Christian ideals for which the movement is deeply rooted. The goal of the YWCA are to bring about quality of life, to develop women as change leaders and members in body, mind, and spirit, to engage in selfless Christian service, and to empower women and girls in dynamic partnership with men and service groups toward total transformation. The Young Women's Christian Association is founded in 1855 by Emma Roberts and Lady Mary Jane Kinnear. These two agreed to consolidate their efforts for a common cause during the Crimean War. In the Philippines, a similar interest group, the Time Investment Club, founded in 1921 under the leadership of Mrs. Felicissima Marcos Barca, became the nucleus of the YWCA movement in the country. The first YWCA was officially organized in October 1926, which is the YWCA of Manila. Its first honorary president was Mrs. Aurora A. Quezon. This was followed by the organization of YWCAs of Baguio and San Pablo, thus the need to have a national organization. Dr. Jose Fajar Martinez was the first chairperson of the Provisional Board who worked on the establishment of the YWCA of the Philippines. And on February 14, 1948, the YWCA of the Philippines was formally created with Dr. Flora Ilagan as the first national president. The YWCA of the Philippines was admitted as a corresponding member of the World YWCA during the World Council meeting in Hangzhou, China in 1948 and was taken in as an active member at the World Council meeting in Beirut, Lebanon in 1951. It is linked with other national YWCA in about 100 countries around the world through the World YWCA, whose headquarters is in Geneva, Switzerland. The YWCA is at work in the Philippines through groups such as YBODs, who is elementary school girls, Y Teens organized in secondary school, Student Y organized in colleges and universities, Young Professional and the Adult Ys. There is also the Community Youth Club, whose members either be in school or out of school. The YWCA of the Philippines has over 20 local associations all over the country and serves over 50,000 people through these local associations. Local Association from Northern Luzon, Local Association from Southern Luzon, Local Association from Visayas region, and Local Association from Mindanao. YWCA leadership headed by Mrs. Lilia A. Farinas, National President, Ms. Marla May A. Baez, National Youth Coordinating or NYCC President, and Mrs. Nerissa B. Liena, National Executive Director. YWCA of the Philippines legal mandate. Affiliated with World YWCA. Programs and services are accredited by the Department of Social and Welfare and Development. We partner with other organizations like YMCA, GSP, NCWP, Renewable Energy Coalition, PhilCADSA, FAWA Philippines. Our local association partner with DepEd, CSWDO, and other entities. YWCA pioneered in health and recreation, introduction of physical education in the school curriculum, adult education, community center, camping for girls, youth work, residence, and ecumenical movement. Here are the YWCA's strategic actions and accomplishments.
Pleasant afternoon to all. The YWCA of the Philippines, with its over 20 local associations from Luzon to Mindanao, welcomes you to the first of the week-long virtual activity in observance of the World YWCA Week Without Violence. This year's observance, which actually starts last Sunday, October 18, focused on the impact of COVID-19 on issues of gender-based violence. I am Nerissa Liana, your host for this afternoon's activity. The Week Without Violence started in YWCA of Canada. The World YWCA Week Without Violence is an annual global campaign to end the scourge of violence against women, young women, and girls. Throughout the week, activities focus on raising awareness, promoting attitude change, and enabling individuals and organizations to begin positive action towards ending violence in their communities. Every year, during the third week of October, YWCAs from all over the world promote and encourage Week Without Violence, a week-long series of community events promoting diverse approaches to creating a world free of violence. At the global YWCA movement, we believe that this includes enhancing women's voices in decision making, leadership, and peace building, promoting women's economic empowerment, ending violence against women, young women, and girls, and finding new ways for young women to connect, mobilize, and inspire each other so they can take collective action. We believe all women, young women, and girls should have the right to be safe and live free from fear and violence in all its forms, and that addressing violence against women, young women, and girls must be a priority for all. We strive to mobilize women's transformative leadership to end violence against women, young women, and girls once and for all through local, national, regional, and international advocacy efforts, education, programs, resilience work, and support services. In collaboration with the National Youth Coordinating Council and the Local and Global Affairs Committee, our first offering is on the topic, how has COVID-19 impacted the issues related to gender-based violence? But before we proceed, allow me to give you a few reminders in observance of proper Zoom etiquette. We ask you to set your mics on mute throughout the program. Please turn off your cameras. Please be advised that this session is recorded for documentation purposes. If you have any questions, you may use the chat feature so that the host can acknowledge you. The doxology will be given by Ms. Nina Crista Mejaro, National Council member of the YWCA of the Philippines and a 3-week champion of Tawag ng Tanghalan Showtime. This will be followed by the singing of the Philippine National Anthem.
The splendor of our King, clothed in majesty, all the earth rejoice, let all the earth rejoice. He wraps himself in light, and darkness tries to hide, and trembles in his voice, and trembles in his voice. How great is our God? Sing with me, how great is our God. Oh, we see how great is our God. Edge to beginning and the end, the Godhead three in one, the Father, Spirit inside, the Lion and the Lamb, the Lion and the Lamb. How great is our God? Sing with me, how great is our God? And oh, we see how great is our name above all names, worthy of praise. My heart will sing, how great is our God. Name above all names, worthy of all praise. My heart will sing, how great is our God. How great is our God? Sing with me, how great is our God? And oh, we see how great is our God. How great is our God.
Mga kababayan, ang pambansang awit ng Pilipinas.
Indeed, how great is our God. To give her welcome remarks, I would like to call on the NYCC President, Ms. Marla May Baez.
In accordance with Week Without Violence and in continuation of our Why Talk webinar series under Let's Go Physical, the Young Women's Christian Association will be conducting a series of webinars from October 20 to 24 with notable speakers and moderators. This week, we will be opening our Why Talk series with a webinar on how has COVID-19 impacted the issues of gender-based violence. There has been evidence from previous health crises indicating that violence against women and girls is a likelihood, a long-lasting exacerbated impact of the COVID-19 pandemic. And we all know that all forms of violence against women, young women, and girls are a violation of human rights and have high social and economic cost. With this, the YWCA of the Philippines, through the Local and Global Affairs Committee and the National Youth Coordinating Council, is conducting the series of Y Talk webinars and forums to discuss issues affecting women in this pandemic situation. Having said that, I would like to welcome all of you to today's webinar with the hope that the learnings that we will be able to gather today will be mirrored in our advocacies, thoughts, and our daily actions.
Thank you, Marla, all the way from YWC of Rojas City. This activity will not be complete without the participation of our guest supporters and participants. I would like to start by calling members of the National Council, headed by our National President, Mrs. Lilia A. Parinas, who will be joining us later via Zoom, but she will be giving us a message also. Of course, we have our Vice President for Program and Membership, Dr. Early Datario. You heard Marla earlier. We have our Assistant Secretary, Ms. Rita Sambarano from YWCA of Rojas City. Members and officers and members of the different local associations present. We will be calling them one by one later. Of course, the Local and Global Affairs Committee with its chairperson, Mrs. Remedios A. Bicomo. She's also the president of YWCA of Quezon City. Hello, ma'am. Her members include Ms. Marcia Bicomo. Another member from YWCA Quezon City also, and member of the Local and Global Affairs, is Rachel de la Cruz. We are so privileged to have with us the National Council of Women of the Philippines, the umbrella organization of the different women's organization in the country. We have with us the Vice President for Luzon, all the way from Kawayan, Isabela, Dr. Cecilia D. We also have the Vice President for NCR from Patamaba, Wise, Miss Josephine Padilla. We have the Treasurer of the NCWP and a member of the YWCA, actually Chairman of the NOMELEC Committee of the YWCA, Attorney Alice Vidal. And of course, representative of the institutional members of NCWP, Professor Olive Villafuerte from the Philippine Women's University. Thank you so much for gracing this afternoon's forum. I will be calling our resource person, but she will be introduced properly by our chairperson. We would like to acknowledge Attorney Clara Rita Padilla. Hello, ma'am. And belated happy birthday.
Hello.
Belated happy birthday. Okay, we would like also to acknowledge the different local associations of the YWCA of the Philippines. From YWCA of Makati, the president is here, Ms. Elizabeth Diaz. From YWCA of San Pablo, we have representative from YWCA of San Pablo, from YWCA of Quezon City, from YWCA of Rojas City, they're here. We would like also to recognize other government agencies here. We have the Department of Budget and Management, NCR. Thank you for coming. Organizations and school who participated in this afternoon forum, from PhilHealth Region 6, from DepEd Biliran, San Jose del Monte, Bulacan, Dagupan City, from the University of Manila, Mariano Marcos Memorial Hospital and Medical Center, Batac, Ilocos Norte. Essentia Medical Group, we have participants from the DRRMO Makati City, from DOH Mega DATRC, King's College of the Philippines, Baguio City, Panay Ladies Association, Panay Rizal, Stillwater's Educamp Academy, Calapan, Mindoro, from Zamboanga Chonghua High School, Jose Reyes Memorial Medical Center, Bukidnon State University, LGU, Dipaculao, Aurora. We have from the Polytechnic University of the Philippines. From Ilocos Training and Regional Medical Center, thank you so much for attending this afternoon's activity. We have participants from RPHA, Bawang, La Union, Cardinal Santos Memorial Medical Center, from SI San Juan, Soroptimus International of San Juan, of course, from Patamaba, as I mentioned earlier, and AV Gedang Foundation Incorporated. Thank you so much for coming, and thank you for having this the time to share with us your time and enjoy learning. This week's activity is so loaded with all the activities and with all the knowledge that you will get from different resource persons. So with that, I would like to call on our chairperson of the Local and Global Affairs Committee, Mrs. Remedios O. Bicomo, to introduce to us our resource person. Ma'am Remy?
Good afternoon, everyone. It is with distinct honor and privilege to be given the task of introducing our resource person for this afternoon's online forum. Our speaker, Attorney Clara Rita Padilla, is the founder and executive director of EnGender Rights, a legal non-governmental organization advancing women's rights through domestic and international legal and policy advocacy, research, publication, training, and impact litigation in the Philippines and in Southeast Asia. Holder of a Juris Doctor degree from the Ateneo de Manila Law School and a Bachelor of Arts degree in Communication from the University of the Philippines in Diliman. Attorney Padilla has been practicing law for over 26 years, prosecuting perpetrators of violations of women and LGBTIQA persons' rights. She is known in the Philippines and internationally, working in the fields of gender, gender-based violence, sexual and reproductive health and rights, and diverse sexual orientation and gender identities. She has worked in the Philippines and in New York as an international visiting legal fellow at the Center for Reproductive Rights from July through July 1 year, 2002-2003. Attorney Padilla is a widely published feminist lawyer and human rights lawyer. She has written various trailblazing books, articles, papers, protocols, primers, and submissions, such as the EnGender Rights publication on safe and legal abortion, rape, and everything, to name a few. She is co-writer of the Outright Action International and EnGender Rights publication entitled Protocol to Address Domestic Violence and Family Violence Experienced by Lesbian, Gay, Bisexual, Transgender, and intersex persons in the Philippines. Attorney Padilla has also been conducting trainings and panel discussions and speaking engagements in different parts of the Philippines and around the world, catering to both private and government agencies. Locally, she has been tapped as consultant by notable government leaders and officers, such as those of Senator Miriam Defensor Santiago and that of Mayor Joy Belmonte of Quezon City. She won several Supreme Court and bank cases. like the 2010 landmark case of Ang Ladlad versus Comelec, the constitutionality of the RH law, and the labor doctrine case, Pioneer Texturizing Corporation versus NLRC and Lourdes de Jesus. In recognition of her work, Attorney Padilla has received an award from the Quezon City Pride Council and Purple Feather from the Order of St. Aelred. In May 2020, she drafted a bill decriminalizing abortion for the Philippines Safe Abortion Advocacy Network, and her Facebook post on the said bill to celebrate International Women's Health Day, and it went viral in just 6 days with over 11,000 people supporting the bill. We are so proud of her, and so without much ado, ladies and gentlemen, let us all welcome Attorney Clara Rita Padilla.
Good afternoon, everyone. Hello. I'd like to share my screen now for my presentation. Okay, so I'll start with my presentation. The scope is actually very wide because we are talking about COVID-19 impact on issues related to gender-based violence. Okay, so first, for starters, I'd like to talk about issues related to the COVID-19 pandemic. When we talk about fear of COVID-19, just a minute, I think we've missed the slide. Okay, there are many unreported cases actually of gender-based violence. There's restriction on mobility and lack of capability of survivors. Wait a minute, I think we missed. Okay, I'll start with this slide instead. Okay, so the impact of the COVID-19 pandemic is that we have higher incidences of gender-based violence. It could be intimate partner violence. It could be rape or incest. It could be sexual exploitation or trafficking. We have read reports of police officers even being the perpetrators of sexual exploitation or trafficking. Some are engaged, some of the women are engaged in, you might say, contractual sex. Others were just plainly victimized during the intense COVID-19 mobility restrictions. So there are also high rates now of online sex trafficking, and later we'll talk about issues related to joblessness, hunger in relation to sex trafficking. There's also sexual harassment happening, whether in public spaces and also online. There have been a lot of students emailing us, messaging us, and even asking for briefings to address the ongoing sexual harassment happening online during this pandemic. And probably that's because of a lot of people being online now. But as you would see, there are a lot of reported cases, and we have seen reports of intimate partner violence. However, in our experience as well, when I say our experience, in Quezon City, I'm a consultant of the Office of the Mayor, and we set up this Quezon City Protection Center for women, children, and LGBT victim survivors of gender-based violence. And we saw that we had reports from barangays, intimate partner violence, rape, and the barangay vow desk officers knew of these cases. However, the survivors did not want to either go to the barangay office, or much more so, they did not want to go to the police during the scope of March, April, May, and even mid part of June. So there are a lot of unreported cases with the police, but we knew of some cases that were happening, of course. And I'll go back to the first slide. Okay, so because of the fear of COVID-19, as I mentioned earlier, there were a lot of unreported cases. There was, of course, restriction of on mobility. There was also, we also saw that there was lack of capability of survivors to seek help. Some, and until now, we are experiencing COVID-19. They're saying that they do not have money to go to our Quezon City Protection Center. They were stuck, although they are residents of Quezon City, for example, they were stuck in nearby Rizal and they couldn't travel. Some even mentioned that they did not have cell phone units or load and no landline to contact us even. So that was very difficult. And as I mentioned, there were less criminal complaints filed. So if you compare with the PNP report that there were less rape cases, I do not believe that, because I think it was merely because of the fear of COVID-19. So we actually know that in any kind of humanitarian crisis, including the COVID-19 pandemic, that there is always an increase of gender-based violence, and the kinds of gender-based violence I already mentioned earlier. There's also the issue of lack of shelters. So we found that although some wanted to leave their abusive partners or husbands, or there were rape cases, there was actually a lack of shelters. Even, as you know, we have the RA 8505 requiring rape crisis centers to be established in every province and in every city, in fact. So I know of some funders who had to ask for certain spaces to be ready to take in a few rape survivors. Okay, so the other impact, so as I mentioned, the scope is very wide. The other impact, of course, of the pandemic, and we saw this from reports, is the high unintended unwanted pregnancies. And this would, of course, be due to the lack of access to contraceptives. We mentioned mobility restrictions. They are too poor to buy contraceptives. And this would not just include poor people, but also, for example, middle-income people who might have lost their jobs during the pandemic. And this would be related to high gender-based violence. So if there is sexual assault, whether of a minor or an adult who's in a relationship, if they are raped, then there's a high possibility of having an unwanted pregnancy resulting from rape. So as I've mentioned, coupled with the problem of joblessness and the issue of poverty, we will have a lot of these problems, which the PAPCOM has already mentioned, and for example, even UNFPA has already mentioned as well. So from reports, we saw that for this 2020 year, there is already an estimated 26% increase of maternal deaths due to the pandemic's disruption of access to health services. And I will explain later, there's also lack of access to emergency contraceptives. Emergency contraceptives can actually prevent pregnancy resulting from rape. But as you will see later, I will explain that very few people know about emergency contraceptives. And this is unfortunate because it's only effective within 5 days. It's not an abortifacient. So for example, the meeting of the sperm and egg, when the rape happens, unfortunately, when the egg and the sperm meets within the 5 days from the incident, it's going to implant on the 6th or 7th day. So that's why it's very important for us to talk about the need for emergency contraceptives within 5 days from a rape incident. And then also, we also see the high increase of maternal death from unsafe abortion complications due to lack of access to safe abortion. So here you would see, this is directly related to gender-based violence. I will have examples as well later. When there's lack of access to safe abortion and high unintended pregnancies, unwanted pregnancies resulting from rape, you would have women inducing unsafe abortion, and they would have complications and they can die from that. And so the statistics that we have is that at least 3 women die every day from complications from unsafe abortion. Hence, what was mentioned in my introduction, I drafted a bill to decriminalize abortion precisely to save women's lives. Okay, so I'd like to talk about the National Demographic and Health Survey, where I'd like us to think about what has been found. And it has been found that the more children a woman has, the more likely she is to have experienced violence. So we see this in places like, for example, Tondo, where you have women having 6 or more, 8, 10, 11 children. I've interviewed many women having 11 children, and they also report battery that they experience from their partners. So here we're saying that not being able to control your fertility relates to the power dynamics in intimate relationships. We also have one example, Lorena. These are their aliases. Her husband was arrested, but Lorena did not push through with the case. She was battered. Okay? So a year later, she was rushed to the hospital for facial and head injuries. As the husband repeatedly punched her face with a brass knuckle, she was confined for about a month, and the QC Protection Center, our center, proactively sought Lorena during her recovery to assist her in filing her case. So what the reason why I'm citing this case is because you will see that even a year ago, even while she was battered a year ago, for example, and her husband was arrested, she did not push through with the case. And later on, a year after, she had extreme facial injuries, head injuries, needing treatment for about a month, and very, very expensive as well. Okay, so that's why it's important for us to be able. Later, I'll discuss psychiatric disorders as well to help us assess abusive persons. And here is another example, Nena. Nena was pregnant at the time when her husband would frequently kick her back and buttocks. Nena suffered pregnancy complications and was rushed to the hospital due to bleeding. So here you would see there are clear examples. This is from a case I handled, and we just won the nullity case. Here, you would see that some women pregnant, they suffer extreme domestic violence, such as being kicked on her back and buttocks, and they suffer pregnancy complications. So even when this could be a case of spontaneous abortions. Okay, so here is another example. Maria was pregnant at the time when her husband kicked her abdomen. After a week, she rushed to the hospital for pregnancy complications. It was found that she had an intrauterine fetal demise. The fetus inside died. The health workers mistakenly suspected her of inducing an abortion and insisted that she admit to the drug she took. Of course, she did not take any drug. So the health workers delayed her access to emergency care. So these are examples of gender-based violence, cases that could happen now, even during the pandemic. And of course, we have examples of a woman who was pregnant and who was brought to 6 hospitals, if you remember, during this pandemic. And she was denied access to emergency care. And unfortunately, she died. Okay, so here are some examples of incest, just to show when the two children, one was around 6 years old and one was around 15, when they came into the Quezon City Protection Center, I was there. Um, um, I was a bit scared of what they would report to us, and I somehow knew that it was incest, and I was correct. They reported that they were raped by the father. The 15-year-old was actually raped since she was 9 years old. And when she was about 13, um, she reported frequent UTI. Okay, so when she was brought to the OB-GYN asked her mother if her daughter was sexually active. The mother said, "No, she's not sexually active." Uh, Unfortunately, the rape continued until she was 15, and the problem here also is that the rape continued as against the 15-year-old, and the younger sister was also raped starting at age 6. So here, and the only reason why the case was reported because the 6-year-old reported to a classmate, and the classmate reported to the teacher, and the teacher reported to the guidance counselor. So here we're seeing the important roles, for example, of your organizations in terms of partnering with schools, partnering with OB-GYN people, because we can address gender-based violence and arrest, for example, further cases of rape happening. Okay, so I'd just like to cite this slide particularly. It was mentioned in NDHS 2008, just to show that there are women themselves who justify the beating that they suffer from their husbands or partners. So one is when they burn the food, when they argue with him, when they go out without telling him, when they neglect the children, when they refuse to have sexual intercourse with him, they think that it's justified. So unfortunately, what I'm trying to say here is that we need to change the views of women that no beating, of course, is justified. So here, at least 1 in 10 believe that the above reasons are justified. So that's unfortunate because that's 1 in 10. And here you will see also that if they live, if they have low education or they are poor, they would relate also to increased acceptance of justification. But this is just a general rule because I have had cases where they are not necessarily poor, and they still justify the abuses of their husband until they report 15 years later, 25 years later. Okay, so generally this would be the case, and then it was also shown that there was a high incidence, high acceptance of reasons in wife beating in areas such as BARM now, Soc-Sargen, Ilocos, Cagayan Valley, Mimaropa. Okay, so as I mentioned, there are abusive behaviors that we should be able to recognize. For example, narcissistic personality disorder. What is narcissistic personality disorder? This would be people who think that they are the most handsome, for example, and they would think that they're God's gift to the human race, and that it's always like everything should be done for them. Okay, and unfortunately, when someone is narcissistic, they can take advantage of a lot of people, and when they start to physically hurt or rape someone, and then perform crimes, commit crimes, that would be an antisocial behavior, or a sociopath or psychopath. Okay, so it's good for us to have, for example, speakers who can talk about this and explain that there are often you would see that the perpetrators already have these abusive behaviors, and of course the borderline personality, where those who are sometimes abused are the ones who have borderline personalities from happy to sad, etc. Okay, and then violence as a learned behavior. So I'm citing this because during the pandemic, this becomes intense due to, as I've said, the impact on mobility, the poverty, the hunger, the joblessness, etc. Okay, so when you say learned behavior, when the person was battered, for example, by the father, by the mother, by an aunt or uncle, that person learns the abusive behavior and then commits abusive behavior against their intimate partners or other people as well. So I call that the batterer mentality. So I just like for us to think about other issues as well. So the UN Special Rapporteur on Violence Against Women in a report said that economic equality is a key factor which prevents violence against women. So, of course, we will see that denying women economic power and economic independence is a major cause of violence against women because it prolongs their vulnerability and dependence. So, for instance, we have cases now at the Quezon City Protection Center this pandemic where our clients have been messaging us. One client, for example, has been messaging us, but is unable to go to us, and because of economic lack of economic independence. In fact, she does not have a separate home. She is unable to leave the abusive relationship and is unable to go to us. Okay, so these are examples that's happening currently now during the pandemic. So what we're seeing, of course, is that we should eliminate gender-based violence and stop impunity. So gender-based violence should not happen with impunity or without accountability. Otherwise, it will continue to happen. So we want to prevent and prosecute as well, if possible, if the complainant would like to prosecute. However, of course, we know that even with the anti-vowsy, even any person who witnesses the violence can actually file complaints. Okay, so we want to stop the gender-based violence. There should be zero tolerance of gender-based violence. It's not a private matter. Okay, so I'd like to mention the obligation of due diligence to address gender-based violence from the Committee on Elimination of Discrimination Against Women, basically saying that due diligence is preventing, investigating, punishing acts of gender-based violence. And there should be medical assistance as well to survivors. In here, just to cite the whole impact in relation of what's happening during the impact of the pandemic as well. So as I mentioned, we have high unintended pregnancies because of the issues related to gender-based violence as well. So there's a cycle even of early pregnancies and childbirth. So this can happen now. They are young mothers, for example, even early 30s and all. And they may have adolescent daughters as well, who may become pregnant early as well. So that can happen. And in some of the cases I've interviewed, that has happened. Multiple pregnancies as well, disruption of studies, low educational attainment, lack of job skills, career options, low financial capability. So of course, we're trying to address issues related to gender-based violence, including issues related to reproductive rights and addressing poverty as well. So we have the cycle of poverty, the dire economic health, and living conditions as well. Okay, so I'd just like to mention that adolescent pregnancies, when they become pregnant, they have risky pregnancies and childbirths leading to maternal deaths. Higher risks high risks, 2 times risk of dying as opposed to adults. And then for 15 years old and below, higher risks, that's about 3 times higher. And then the infants that they give birth to are actually have 3 times risk of dying as well. So now I'd like to cite the new statistics that came out recently during this pandemic. So there's about 40 to 50 adolescent girls aged 10 to 14 giving birth every week. Okay, so when you say 10 to 14, we have researched that 15 and below many of them became pregnant due to sexual assault. Okay, so let's be mindful about that. So we're saying here we should address gender-based violence. There should be access to emergency contraceptives and even safe abortion. Why? Because if they are 15, they became pregnant as a result of rape, and they continue with the pregnancy, they can die from the risky pregnancy and childhood. Okay, so we're also saying that in terms of prevention, we should raise the age of sexual consent to 16 as recommended by the CEDAW committee, and there are bills now on these. We have statistics now from NDHS 2017 saying that we have 9% of adolescent women and girls age 15 to 19 that have already begun childbearing. And from 2013, this only went down 1%. Okay, so from 2013, 1% down to 9%, meaning there are too many adolescent women and girls giving birth in the Philippines. Okay, and then now we have 500 adolescent women and girls giving birth every day. Okay, and so that would, and some of them may be victims of rape. Okay, so well, here I'd just like to cite an example as well that the gender-based violence can happen to people of diverse sexual orientation, gender identity, and expression. But this example is gender-based violence, but this was committed by a teacher just to show that when someone does not recognize the transgender identity of here a transgender boy, he was made to parade in school using the curtain as a makeshift skirt. And then just because the teacher, actually it's not a teacher, it's the principal, the principal was saying that you are a girl, you're not a boy, so you should wear a skirt. Okay? So unfortunately, the trans boy became suicidal, dropped out of school, and he was forced to transfer school several times. Okay? So what we're seeing is that this is happening as well in the homes. We have parents beating their transgender boy child, or beating their lesbian daughters as well. So we're saying that we have reports, the Quezon City Protection Work Center, and within gender rights, we have worked with Outright, where we saw, given this pandemic, there are a lot of domestic and family violence, domestic violence as well. The violence in between intimate partners do not just happen heterosexually, but also with diverse sexual orientation and gender identity. Okay. So basically, I just like to cite that there's freedom of thought, conscience, and religion. Freedom to believe is absolute. So, for example, a parent might say, "Well, I think that you should not be a lesbian or something," but the freedom to act, of course, the parent should not beat the daughter. Okay, so the freedom to act on one's belief, that's not absolute. So, but what I'm saying as well is that lesbians have their right to their sexual orientation, gender identity, and expression. And we have won cases such as these. What was mentioned earlier during my bio is the Angladlad case, basically saying that the COMELEC cannot use the Bible and the Quran to exclude Angladlad. And that morality, we cited the case of Estrada versus Escritor also, that morality in law is public and secular and not religious. So just a few more slides. Here I just like to cite that we should be well aware as well of the medical provision, medical treatment that should be provided to for sexual abuse survivors. So within 3 days, they should have the HIV test. And if they test negative, they can take the 28-day regimen of post-exposure prophylaxis. You can ask PGH, sa GIP unit. These are the units on HIV/AIDS core team. But basically, I know that PGH, sa GIP unit, knows about this. And then within 5 days, I mentioned already the emergency contraceptive pills. And then IUD can be used until 7 days. Why? Because IUD only kills the sperm. Okay. So on the second week, Hep B vaccine, because we do not want the survivor to have Hep B because of the sexual assault. And then unwanted pregnancy, if they became pregnant as a result of the rape, even if they induce an abortion, we're saying that there are laws already where they should not be afraid. They should, if they suffer complications, they should run to the hospital, and the hospital should treat them based on the anti-hospital deposit law to treat emergency and serious cases, based on also the Magna Carta of Women, and also based on the RH Law Supreme Court decision saying that health services for emergency or serious cases should be provided. Okay. So repeat tests on HIV on the 3rd and 6th months. And then the same for the STI, and then even psychological state. It's very important to address psychological state as well, because some may become suicidal. And of course, pap smear within a year and thereafter. Okay, so just a few more slides. Here is the emergency contraception. So what we have in the Philippines now would be the oral contraceptive pills, the estrogen, progestin. And what we have in the market often is the low dose. So for a rape survivor can take 4 pills together with Bonamine, Contrahilo. And then, so 4 pills of, for example, Trust, and then Bonamine. And then after 12 hours, another 4 pills of Trust and Bonamine. Okay. So this can prevent pregnancy resulting from rape up to 5 days. Okay. So unfortunately, we still have a lot of dismissals of rape complaints. So that's why we're saying that we should bust the rape myths, eliminate victim blaming, that no one should be blamed except the perpetrator, that there are different types of women's resistance. There's no standard behavioral response for rape survivors, that the delay in reporting does not affect credibility. Rape can happen anywhere and anytime. And there are no standard lacerations, because there's a Supreme Court case saying there are standard lacerations, and there's no such evidence scientifically. Okay, so just aside, we have a Filipino woman or girl raped every 75 minutes. And then 1 in every 8 of these Filipino women who are, well, 1 rape survivor out of, okay. So there are 8 Filipino women, for example, who induce abortion. Out of the 8, there's always 1 of them who is a rape survivor. Okay, so just to show that this is really a problem. The issue of inducing unsafe abortion and rape survivors inducing unsafe abortion. So just a few more slides, just to show that there are women who died from unsafe abortion complications. They were raped. For example, a 19-year-old raped by her stepfather died in 2012. So she was raped. She became pregnant as a result of the rape. She induced unsafe abortion unsafely, and she died. The same with a 26-year-old daughter who was raped by an older man who funded her medical education, and she died in 2004. Other rape survivors have tried to commit suicide, and others who were forced to carry their pregnancies to term have died as well. And one is a 21-year-old rape victim with dwarfism condition, and because she has her height is less than 4 feet 9 inches, dwarfism, okay, that's a risky pregnancy and childbirth. So she died after giving birth the day after due to her risky childbirth in 2015. Okay. So these are the cases that can be filed, of course. So we added the new ones here, safe spaces, etc. Okay. And then, of course, in certain areas, there are ordinances. For example, in Quezon City, we drafted, and this was passed into law, the Quezon City Gender Fair Ordinance. And this is against discrimination based on sexual orientation, gender identity, and expression. Okay. Okay. So just some hotlines. So the PNP, we have 911. And then I don't know about the provinces. um, we should be able to create our own hotlines locally and nationally. And then I'm flashing here the deaf resources where we also find that there are a lot of survivors of rape who are deaf. And for children, 2 out of 3 deaf children have experienced sexual assault. For adult women, there's statistics showing 1 out of every 3 adult deaf women were survivors of rape. Okay, so that's why I'm flashing the number of deaf resources Philippines. Okay, so this is just the Quezon City Protection Center. You can call the Protection Center. These are the numbers. Okay. So what we can do is to raise awareness on gender-based violence, prevent, investigate, punish, raise awareness on liability, referral, encourage complaints, reach out to peers, guidance counselors, create a support group. And then, okay. So other things that we can do would be to pass laws, for example, law on divorce, law on um, uh, anti-discrimination based on SOGI, law on raising the age of sexual consent, the law to decriminalize abortion as well, and even to repeal the penalty on vagrancy as regards prostitution as well, because we all know that penalizing those engaged in contractual sex do not help. And then even repealing the law on infidelity and which is of course adultery and concubinage, because we have found that it is actually the abusive men, the husbands, who file cases of adultery. And I have had several cases handling those. These were cases of abusive husbands filing cases of adultery even while they have been long separated uh, with the wives they were previously married. Okay. So that's all. Thank you.
Thank you, Attorney Claire. That was very informative presentation. I'm sure you're all ready to ask questions, so we'll give you time. You can use the chat box for your questions. So as you prepare for that, we will hear the message of the National President of the YWCA of the Philippines in observance of the Week Without Violence, Mrs. Lilia A. Farinas.
A beautiful and blessed day to everyone. What has happened this year? Every year in the third week of October, YWCAs around the world participate in the Week Without Violence campaign. YWCA observe its common vision, legacy, and future as part of this dynamic movement that advances the human rights and leadership of women, young women and girls. This year, in the shadow of COVID-19, activities will be majorly virtual as YWCA take a moment to name the YWCA as an invaluable global movement of leaders and their contributions towards ensuring safety of women during this global pandemic. We use the YWCA Virtual Safe Spaces tool for women's rights leaders to speak of their work and their realities in the current context. This is yet another adaptation of the YWCA Safe Spaces model that has been at the heart of our work since the 19th century. Evidence from previous health crises indicates that violence against women and girls is likely to be a lasting exacerbated impact of the COVID-19 pandemic. For instance, women and girls endure multiple forms of violence including trafficking, child marriage, intimate partner violence, sexual exploitation, and abuse. All forms of violence against women, young women and girls are a violation of human rights and have high social and economic costs. World YWCA has responded to the crisis and lockdown protocols by adapting our approaches to better suit this reality. One key strategy is online engagement and consultation across the women's movement. In the series of consultations with the YWCA members, friends, and supporters, it was evident that creating awareness and advocating on COVID-19 pandemic and its impact on gender-based violence is the need of the hour in order to progress towards elimination of violence against women, young women and girls, in order to ensure the impact is as minimal as possible. The world is in the middle of a pandemic that has magnified and exposed the glaring inequalities that the human rights sector has been amplifying for a long time. The gendered impact of the pandemic have invoked analysis on women's rights and how it manifests during this period. African women, for instance, are experiencing two pandemics with Kenya, recording 3,954 schoolgirls becoming pregnant during the 6-month lockdown period. Women and girls are bearing the brunt of the pandemic and are taking extra labor in the form of unpaid care work, as they are the default caregivers, leaving them at a greater risk of sexual violence, gender-based violence, and at a greater mental health risk. The World Health Organization has called for the need to make commitments to scale up investments in mental health as well as in the wake of the pandemic and begin addressing the historic neglect of mental health. YWCAs are at the front front of this battle. The YWCA of the Philippines, true to its trust of providing reliable information, is holding several online activities that touches on the spiritual, mental, and physical welfare of women and girls. Last month, we conducted the Zoom Bible class and the mental health awareness, and today we are focusing on gender-based violence and issues of women's health, which is the concern of many women working from home and girls and young women with their online classes and use a virtual platform to go by with the new normal. We trust that these online forums provide you with awareness and practical application in your life. Let us all be together to say no to all forms of violence, be it done to women. Let us say no to all forms of violence committed to all God's creation. Thank you.
Thank you, President Leah. And now we're ready. I hope you have put your questions. Just a few tidbits about our moderator. Attorney Alicia Rizos Vidal is the president of the Women Lawyers Association of the Philippines and is the incumbent chairperson of the Nominating and Elections Committee of the YWCA of the Philippines. In the civic circle, Attorney Vidal is the treasurer of the National Council of Women of the Philippines, the umbrella organization of women organizations in the country. She served for 13 years as National Director of the Integrated Bar of the Philippines. Let's welcome Attorney Alicia Rizos Vidal.
Thank you, Neri. Am I in now? I can't see my... Okay. Thank you, Neri. Hello, Attorney Clara Rita Padilla,
Hello.
my idol. Here are your questions. We have plenty of questions here, some of which are already discussed. However, they need more emphasis siguro. From Marisa Panes, from DepEd, Quezon City. The question is, in times of this pandemic, how can we cope up and what and how can we contribute to society, maybe to reduce this gender-based violence?
Okay. Should I answer now? Okay.
Yes, thank you.
Well, it's very important to organize um, and to raise awareness. So if you could organize Zoom activities or even, I don't know if your site is a website or an FB page, you could explore social media, for example, whether FB, Instagram, Twitter, because a lot of the young ones um, are active in this social media forum. So, and the reason why I'm stating this is because um, most of those who may be experiencing um, intimate partner violence would be um, could be millennials, could be Gen Z, could be baby boomers as well, but a lot may be millennials. So I think that it's a good opportunity, especially now, where a lot of people are still doing work at home, that we should engage these kinds of fora for us to raise awareness, discuss issues related to whether it's sexual harassment, rape, whether it's about incest, marital rape, and
Okay, thank you. So, in short, we should raise awareness even in our homes, everywhere. We should raise awareness so we can reduce this gender-based violence. Next question is from Marites Gabiola, North Fairview School Faculty Club. How to assess children and parents facing issues related how to assess children and parents facing issues related during this time of crisis, maybe connected with gender-based violence, how to assess Attorney Padilla.
okay. It's quite difficult now during the COVID pandemic, but uh, without the pandemic, we saw that when children, if you're talking about children for an example now, when the children do not go to school, or if they are in school and they used to be boisterous, for example, or they used to chat a lot, and suddenly they become silent, or they cry for some reason, or they uh, fight with other children, um, or they start uh, sexually abusing other children as well. They may be suffering maybe incest, uh, or domestic violence, family violence at home. So these are some of the examples that can be seen as evidence of gender-based violence happening at home. Now, perhaps during the pandemic, that's why we can meet with the Parents Teachers Association and conduct um, counseling, perhaps even with the guidance counselor. They can probably set separate discussions, um, like how are you sessions, for example. And it has been the case where children open up to co-students, open up to their teachers, open up to guidance counselors. So that could be one. For intimate partner violence, what we have seen is, um, um, well, even without the pandemic, for the barangay people, they could identify in what they could call puroks. So in effect, they would be delineating sections of the barangay, and they would be able to identify in certain puroks and investigate whether there are cases of gender-based violence. And usually, um, by segregating the barangays into puroks, they can find out uh, which homes, they would hear about, for example, any kind of domestic violence happening. This, in spite of reports not being made directly with the barangay, and the neighbors, in fact, would know, would hear, and that's also a way of investigating and reaching out.
Okay, thank you, Attorney Padilla. In short, communication, open communication, and then be observant of any changes in your children or in your partners. Okay, number 3 from Edelwina Politico, DepEd Doña Juana Elementary School. Oh, this is, the question is, how can we help the women staying in the house in terms of livelihood? Attorney Padilla, can you answer that, or it's out of your league?
Well, just to mention that there are projects, for example, or programs of local government units. So this can be, or even for agricultural areas, or not even agricultural areas. For example, the DA would provide seeds and trainings. I don't know if there are online trainings now. Quezon City has this program where they give out seeds that can be planted. Plus, of course, training from TESDA, training from, I don't know how we can do this with online trainings, but it's possible. I have seen online trainings being done on culinary arts, even by CCA, for example. So we can identify with even our colleagues or even existing businesses. They might employ some of those who are suffering intimate partner violence, because as I've mentioned, we have seen in cases that it's very important for them to be financially stable and for them to finally decide to leave their abusive relationship. So we should be able to support, whether it's education, whether it's skills training, whether it's tindahan. In Quezon City, we have this tindahan that's given to single mothers and all. So that can be used as well. Apart from, of course, the dole, and apart from the peso that the LGUs have.
Okay, thank you. Edgar Alan Reyes, Makati DRRM Office. Any changes in gender-based violence practices for camp management, mga humanitarian, ano?
Okay. Yeah. So, EnGender also does work on humanitarian crisis. So there are trainings, for example, with the UNFPA, and they have resources as well. And there, you talk about having lighted pathways in the going to the evacuation centers, lighted pathways to the comfort room, and for the comfort room to be near, to be able to provide, of course, the evacuation centers should have segregated even rooms, segregated comfort rooms, not just for male, female, but also for transgender people as well. And then segregated rooms for the parents and the children as well. So because we all know that incest can happen, and because there's also a possibility of mental health crisis,
Yes.
and then lack of money and food as well. So there should always be access to food, water, clothing, because this can also create issues as regards the families. So all these should be provided, as well as counseling on mental health. And of course, if there's violence, that should be addressed clearly with the barangay as well. But as I've said, even the simple lighting, simple segregation, and then tackling gender-based violence in the evacuation centers can help as well.
Thank you. Another question from Felma Tabangay, Mariano Marcos Memorial Hospital. I think you discussed already this one. How can we deal gender-based violence during this pandemic?
Well, I mentioned through my presentation, so let's see if we can discuss others through the other questions as well.
Okay, Danilyn Rivera, RPHA. Is there a law that will protect anybody from all this kind of violence? And how is the government responding to all of this?
Okay, so I had a slide earlier on the different laws. So this can be anti-VAUSI, anti-rape law, anti-sexual harassment, for sexual exploitation, anti-trafficking, safe spaces, cybercrime for those committed online. And then if you want damages, of course, the civil code can be used. And then other cases would be even unjust vexation, etc., in addition to the other cases that can be filed. I can provide the PowerPoint to you, so you can, especially those in the DepEd, you can use that for your sessions in school to augment your resources as well.
Okay, thank you. Maria Cecilia Barcelo, DepEd QC. What are the measures in handling God-related in times of pandemic? Gender and development-related problems in times of pandemic.
Okay. Well, we've tackled several already. For example, gender-based violence. We've tackled issues related to even humanitarian crisis, segregation, etc. We also tackled access to trainings, finances, even access to work and all. And then others would be related to trainings and then mental health. And then of course you have and then referral system, complaints and referral. So complaints would be with the barangay, with the police, with the Quezon City Protection Center, which is located at the Quezon City General Hospital.
Okay, thank you. That's all for my end. However, I have one question. You mentioned a lot about emergency contraceptive pills. Do we need a prescription for that, or is that prescribed by the doctor, or what is it about?
You have crisis centers like the QC Protection Center, and then you also have child protection units, women and children protection units, and there's even a DOH AO on this, on the creation of child protection units in hospitals, whether public or private. So these child protection units, Quezon City Protection Center, and then PGH, Women's Desk, they are all aware of how to impart the regimen in terms of emergency contraception. And as regards prescription, these protection centers, protection units can provide a prescription if needed. And then it actually depends on the pharmacy. So if you're able to go to a pharmacy without having reached, for example, any protection center yet, because the sooner the pills are taken, they are more effective. So that's why within 3 days, it's very urgent that one who has suffered, who has been subjected to rape, should take this. And then, of course, for cases where they failed to use contraceptives or the condoms broke, they can even use this as well.
Okay, thank you. That's all on my end. I would like to turn over to you, to Neri. Oh, mute ka, Neri. Open your...
Thank you again. We have some question in the chat box. One is from Miss Professor Olive, Rita. What about what they call marital rape? Is this considered a punishable crime? How does a woman protect herself against this?
Okay. It is punished under RA 8353, the anti-rape law. Actually, it's like this. Even before the anti-rape law, uh, it could be punished, except women were not reporting. And then with the anti-rape law, it's recognized as punished. However, there's still a provision there basically saying that um, if the wife forgives the husband, then it would extinguish the crime and the penalty. So we think this is discriminatory against women because precisely when a marital rape happens, there is an abusive relationship, and given the abusive relationship, you would see a very dominant husband where the husband would influence the wife in forgiving him. So that's why we're trying to remove this provision uh, in the to further amend the anti-rape law. However, we have made this recommendation as early as ever since the law was passed, and we're still advocating for the revision of this law. But
Okay.
to plainly state, it is punishable. How does a woman protect herself against this? The very important thing is uh, for a woman not to be in a relationship with an abusive husband, partner, or whether the partner is heterosexual or with a different sort. So what we're saying is that that's why I flashed the psychiatric disorders, because we should be able to identify who are narcissistic, who are antisocial, and you can see this from how they relate with other people. So if they are abusive to other people, they can easily be abusive to you, as in many of my cases, and I have countless nullity cases that I have handled, and this is very common. So we're saying basically for people, if you know that your boyfriend or your partner is abusive, then that's a red flag already. And if you have a daughter, a sister, a best friend, etc., who's in an abusive relationship, then you should be able to tell that person, because otherwise, I call that a ticking time bomb, because anytime it can happen. And then unfortunately, I know of cases where um, some women have committed suicide because of the abuses.
Okay. Another question, Attorney Claire. How about if the perpetrator is an uncle of the victim and the wife of uncle is tolerating the molestation?
Okay, so here that happens a lot, not just with uncles and their wives, but also with actual fathers and the mothers of the incest survivor. So that's why it's important. Uh, if you are aware of these cases, you can seek the help of the barangay, the police, even without waiting for DSWD. They are required to rescue the child, take them into protective custody, and the DSWD, of course, when this information reaches them, and any doctor or clinic is required to report to the DSWD as well. The same with the police and the barangay. They should go to the house, interview, and take the child into protective custody. And so I have seen cases where sometimes if it's the father, it's the aunt, it's the tita who believes the child and who rescues the child together with the barangay, the police, and the DSWD. So in this case, it would be other relatives or even the barangay, police, and even the teachers who can seek help together with the barangay.
Last question, Attorney, from Nicole. I just want to know why SOGI is not yet passed as a law in our country. What are the reasons why lawmakers did not approve SOGI?
Okay, so I have been advocating for that law as well, because in my context, I would say that we are all equal. For example, whether you're heterosexual or not, and we're saying that anyone has a right to his or her or their own sexual orientation, gender identity, and expression. Um, and with this law, it can actually save a lot of lives, even because we know that some lesbians, some butch lesbians, some transgender men are being raped because of their uh, orientation and gender identity. And some transgender women are killed, for example. And then we know of cases where they are being battered as a child by their own parents. So that's why I'm saying that if this law is passed, a lot of violence, domestic violence, family violence, discrimination uh, would be eliminated. And the only reason why it's hasn't been passed is because of um, some resistance and opposition. But what we're saying is that despite this resistance and opposition from some groups, just like the RH law, I think it will be passed sooner than later, because of the strong advocacy. And we all know that legislators are our representatives. They are representatives of the people. So that's why I'm urging all of you to support these causes, the causes that I mentioned, the laws that need to be passed. And you can support by following up the groups supporting these issues, and then writing to your legislators, because a lot of support letters, petitions are being sent, position papers. When they are heard in Congress, you can actually ask the Committee on Women, Committee on Population, Committee on Justice, whichever committee is hearing this, you can write to them and ask to present your position. And hopefully, of course, you will support the position that is that supports human rights of all.
Okay, thank you. And with that, we're closing the open forum. Thank you again, Attorney Claire and Attorney Alice, for this wonderful exchange of ideas and answering all the questions. Isang tanong pa po, pwede bang makahingi daw sila ng inyong presentation na kanina, so that they
Yes,
would know yung mga hotlines, yung mga organization that you shared with us. At this point, we would like to present our certificate of appreciation and tokens. I will read the citation for the certificate. The Young Women's Christian Association of the Philippines, incorporated in the National Youth Coordinating Council, presents its certificate of appreciation to Attorney Clara Rita A. Padilla for her invaluable contribution as resource person, which led to the success of the Y Talk series on how has COVID-19 impacted the issues related to gender-based violence, held on October 20, 2020 via Zoom. Signed by Marla May A. Baez, NYCC President, yours truly, and of course signed by the National President, YWC of the Philippines, Mrs. Lilia A. Parinas. Then, of course, another certificate of appreciation is given to Attorney Alicia Rizos Vidal. Thank you so much, Attorney Alice, for your contribution as moderator, which led to the success of this Y Talk series on how has COVID-19 impacted the issues related to gender-based violence. Of course, signed by Marla May Baez, NYCC President, yours truly, and signed by Lilia A. Carinas, National President. We have tokens for you. Sana po nakarating na po sa inyo yung tokens namin. Thank you so much for allowing us na maimbita kayo sa gathering na ito. At this is just the first day of the virtual forums that we are organizing. So at this point, to close our today's program, we would like to invite the Vice President for Program and Membership, Dr. Early G. Datario, to give us his parting words.
Our Executive Director, Ma'am Rita, our resource speaker, Atty. Clara, Rita, Padilla, participants, guests, fellow wires, a pleasant afternoon to everyone. In behalf of the Young Women's Christian Association of the Philippines, we would like to express our heartfelt gratitude to Atty. Clara Rita Padilla for enlightening us on the different issues related to gender-based violence. While it is true that quarantine has been an effective measure of controlling infection of COVID-19, however, it has serious psychological and socially disruptive consequences known as quarantine paradox, which include the cases of gender-based violence. Our association, the Young Women's Christian Association of the Philippines, is one of the non-government organizations that is providing necessary services to the victims of this violence through support network to make it easier for them to access as well as create awareness about the issues and available resources to tackle it. Again, thank you very much for your participation in this webinar. We look forward to another webinar in the future. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Early. The different schedules and the link for tomorrow's and until Friday's activity is posted in the chat box. Please register, and also the evaluation forms so that you can get your certificate of participation. Thank you so much for the privilege of your time. And in closing, let me share with you this prayer taken from Psalms chapter 7, verse 9. Bring to an end the violence of the wicked and make the righteous secure you, the righteous God who probes mind and heart. No to gender-based violence, no to violence in all God's creation. Amen.
Amen.
Ba, ang dami pala eh.